I am your host, Nicole Will, and we thank you for joining us as we navigate the world with your aging loved one. We are here to come alongside elders, family members, and the senior living community as we explore the world of aging and elder care with helpful resources, informative interviews, and approachable conversations. We get to do this together, so join us on our journey, and this is the willGather podcast. Today we are interviewing best-selling author and certified life coach Pat Sheveland. She is living proof that a multi-generational approach in caring for your family can still give you the flexibility and freedom to do the things you want to do and live your life with greater peace and joy. Her newest book, Living Life in the Middle, The Caregiver's Guide to Healing, Hope, and Harmony through Multi-Generational Living, provides the steps and tools to help caregivers create a life that provides freedom and flexibility to pursue their dreams while supporting their family. We're so happy to introduce to you Pat Sheveland. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so happy you're here.
Oh, thank you so much. It really is fun to be here. I'm excited about our conversation.
Me too. I just so appreciated your perspective on life and hearing more of your story. Can you share with us what brought you to this place and brought you to the place of writing your book, Living Life in the Middle?
Well, I have been in the caregiving mode since I was a little girl, basically. But I was a nurse back in the day. And so I've been a caregiver in many different aspects. And I think what brought me to where, taking care of my mother and living in a multi-generational home is I worked in a nursing home when I was in my late teens, when I was going to college at 17, 18, and I worked in a nursing home. And I really loved it. And I loved caring for those people, but it hurt my heart to see so many of them there and not having visitors and just kind of lonely. And they really depended upon us as the caregivers. So I promised both of my parents that if there was any way possible, I would not have them go into a nursing home, that I would make sure that they could stay at home with me. The only condition was that they started to have some really serious dementia or something where it was unsafe for them, then I couldn't keep up my end of the commitment probably. But I've been fortunate in that I was able to take care of both my dad and my mother up until their deaths in my home.
That's a gift. It really is.
Yes, yes. My mom moved in with us, very independent woman, in her late 80s. And we lived together almost 8 years before she died just a couple of months ago. And I realized especially during the pandemic, that so many people were living multi-generational living. In our neighborhood alone, there are 5 families that ended up coming together. And having my mom live with us, we started out where my mom lived with my husband and I, and then our son had rented the lower level of our house. And then he got married. And when they were getting married, his wife-to-be said, why don't we buy a big house and we can bring everybody in together, get a mother-in-law suite, buy something big enough so everybody can have their space, but we can all live together, because she was an orphaned woman and orphaned as a child and then orphaned as a young adult when her adopted mother died. So we did that. And so we ended up having 4 generations under one roof, ultimately. And that led me to writing the book. There's a lot that I could probably share in experience to help others who are going through this.
Yes. And just to specify, the book is Living Life in the Middle, The Caregiver's Guide to Healing, Hope, and Harmony through Multi-Generational Living. So you really speak to that.
Yes, absolutely. And there's lots of different ways of multi-generational living. Like I said, we have 5 families on our block. The people next door, they have 4 generations. Some had their kids move back in with grandchildren because of job loss during the pandemic. Other ones, are working from home. So family members are coming in, grandma and grandpa, and taking care of the small children. So it can take a lot of different forms of what multi-generational really means.
It does, yeah. It gets me thinking. I was able to, my family, we had sold our house really quickly, and in our search, ended up moving back in with my parents for a
Mhm.
time while we were looking for a new house. And at that time, it was my husband and I, and my little kids, and then my parents. And there was so much beauty in that time together because we were sharing making meals and running errands and helping with kids. And it really made you realize, gosh, okay, there's something to be said about this way of living and that dynamic of supporting each other.
Absolutely. I write about in my book, but what it's not only the financial support, because we can all pool in our monies to be able to afford maybe a bigger home and have a little bit more room. We've been fortunate that way. But the emotional support, even now, my mother, as I said, passed away a couple of months ago at the ripe old age of 96. But my granddaughters too. So now my husband and I have come up to be the elders of the
Yes.
house. But I take my granddaughter to her daycare in the morning so that her mom can log in and get to work, because my son's not working from home. He's outside of the house, but my daughter-in-law works from home. So I can do some of those daycare runs and get her ready for the day, and be real supportive emotionally from that perspective too.
Right. Yeah. So helpful. So, who would you say this book is for? Who does this speak to?
Oh, I tell you, both, it speaks to the mothers and the daughters. Um, and the daughters may range in age, like yourself, moving in with your parents, even if it was for a shorter period of time, to understand, the dynamics of the family and how to really make this work. And, for people like me, where we're still working, we still have a lot to give to society, but our parents are getting older and not able to care for themselves. And that's really ultimately who I work, or who I wrote it for, is the women who are having careers, working really hard with that. They have elderly parents and they don't want to maybe place them in a nursing home. And even if they do place them in a healthcare facility, there's still a lot of work with that. You need to go check in, you need to have care conferences, all of that kind of thing. And then if you have children, some people have young children, some people my age are even raising their grandchildren for various reasons. And it's overwhelming, so overwhelming, and they're getting burned out. And so this book was really to help, and my coaching program is to help those to say, you know what? You can have all this chaos, all this craziness. There's a beauty in it, but you also need to take care of yourself. You can't give a cup unless you have a gallon for yourself. You
Right.
have to have that within.
I read the book and I loved how it was so practical in that it walks you through in each chapter of really specific ways that you can contemplate things or move through things, think about things, those action steps. So it felt like you're really given that tangible tangible message that we want out of books when we read them, right? Of how do we implement this in our lives and can see the fruit of that. Because I think when we're already overwhelmed and there's so much going on already, the last thing we want to have to do is try to think about, okay, how am I gonna take this and make it happen?
Right. And I joined a lot of caregiving groups like on Facebook, and thinking, from the support factor, and just really hearing what's out there. And it is so overwhelming for people, and they're seeking out the answers, like, how do I do this? How do I go about doing this? I'm so frustrated. I'm burning the candle on both ends. And I'm a certified coach. So that's part of, like, okay, I will help you get action steps, because part of coaching is creating awareness. 50% of a coaching model is creating awareness within ourselves. And then the other 50% is taking action. Because if we never take action, we're going to stay in the same spot.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. There isn't that movement forward. So we're similar in that we both come from that storyteller background, me with more of our podcast and wanting to share stories of what people are doing, and you sharing in the lessons that we can learn from and from each other. And you've created the acronym BALANCE, which walks people through their story to find healing. Can you share with us, what does BALANCE mean?
BALANCE is an acronym. It's interesting though, because that's really what I want to help people, is to be able to find that balance of taking care of themselves and having a fulfilling life and being able to have enough to really fruitfully be able to take care of those around them, to be able to share that. So each letter of the word stands for something. So B is the first part of the program. So it's a step-by-step program, and it's not the end all and be all that this is going to change your life immediately. It takes time, but each of the steps kind of play on each other. So the B stands for the Bodhi, and for people who are understanding of Eastern philosophies, Buddha, I think most of us have heard of Buddha. And it was said that he was sitting underneath the Bodhi tree, and that's where he found enlightenment. And so that is really what the first part is just taking some time to go through some tools and assessments to figure out, who are you today? Because who you were in the past is not who you are today. All of your experiences, your life experiences, living with a bunch of people and taking care of your elderly parents, it changes who you are. And so we want to know, who are you right now, and what are your strengths? What are some of those beautiful strengths that you can bring forward as you're taking action? And also, what are some of the strengths that may hinder you? Sometimes we have beautiful strengths, but it may cause us to go off kilter because, I was talking to a client last night, and she has this beautiful strength of kindness and generosity, which is beautiful because she's giving, but she doesn't give to herself. So she depletes that. So that's the Bodhi, is really having an enlightenment of, who are you? Where are you starting at? What's kind of your framework before you really start taking some steps to build this life that is filled with freedom and flexibility and love and generosity and all that, to take care of everybody, but also to live your dream. And so the next one is A in BALANCE, and that is where we talk about authoring your dreams. So I actually have written in here, but for people who want the book, and I'm giving the book for free, so we'll have that, so you can put that out there that people can get a free ebook from me. But I actually have a guided imagery meditation, and I have a link where people can reach out to me, and I can actually give them the audio version. And it's really to take a little trip, to kind of see what is it that I'd really like to have in my future. And people may not come up with that whole future vision, but the biggest part is I want people to learn how to relax. And so just doing this little guided imagery meditation helps people to just and kind of tap into being a dreamer again, like when we were children.
Right. We lose that a little bit along the way.
Yeah, we get serious, we get adult.
Yeah.
We start adulting, right?
Right. Yes, we need that to come back.
Yeah. And then the next thing that the L in BALANCE stands for life within your village. And so it's taking a look at, who are all the people that are within your home and your village. If you're all living together, who are all the people? Who are the people in your workspace? Who are your support system? I talk about finding your own tribe, and the tribe a lot of times is outside of your family system, because you need to have someone that can be objective and just be there for you, right, and support you as you're making, significant change. And understanding, how do you want your life to look? I talk in the book about my own experience when we all moved into this big house, and I actually did a little exercise, and I have it in the book, where I drew little stick figures of how did we all look when we initially started, and then after several years, how did we look? The change of where we all integrated together versus all being in our separate corners and separate rooms. So that's part of it, is just an awareness of, what does it look like today? I had a client not too long ago where her mother lived with her husband, and her 15-year-old son, and the mother lived downstairs. And so it was almost like this big separation. It was very, very stressful for my client because her husband and son had some real difficulty kind of integrating that. So what we did is work through what really could this look like so that it works for your mom and she's thriving, because she was thriving under her daughter's care, but also that your marriage and the time that you have available for your son. So over the course of our 8 sessions, she really came up with an incredible plan that now works for everybody. And she's just shining, feeling so good.
So
Happy.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I go through actions for health. And so our health will just go to off the charts if we don't take care of ourselves. And when we're caring for everybody else, we tend to forget. We may not eat really healthy. We'll eat on the go. I'm a stress eater. So anytime that I'm feeling emotionally, it's like going into my mouth and into my stomach, right? You may not be sleeping very well. I know that towards the last couple of months of my mom's life, I had the monitor next to my bed. I was on high alert, for a very long period of time to make sure that she was okay and I could hear her. So you may not be sleeping very well. And so I go through some different ideas of what you can do. I call it creating your faith toolbox. And faith is an acronym that I came up with years ago, and it's finding awesome inspiration to heal. And we all have different things that will be good for us, so it's doing your own tailor-made kind of health and wellness program. But I also I teach an Eastern medicine practice called Qigong, which is healing with energy. So I go through and offer up a couple of exercises that people can do, movements that are very simple. And I just thought about this, but the beautiful thing with the Qigong is I actually had my mother in her 90s doing some of these movements when she was feeling a little bit better. And it actually helped with her irritable bowel syndrome, and it helped with the swelling in her legs and all that. But they're just movements that not only for you as the caregiver, but that you can do with your family members and elder care to really help them feel better physically and emotionally too.
Right.
So that is kind of creating a toolbox of health. So I give lots of ideas and like how you can create this toolbox, and they can be as simple as learning how to take 3 breaths, because we forget that at times.
Do. Yes, we do.
Well, then I was going to say, after that, so once we've got our health in order and we're kind of emotionally, we know that we've got some good tools to help us emotionally. One of the things that I think is really important is for us to take a look at perceptions. And when we're living with family members, I use a program called Human Design. That's something that in the beginning of the book that I talk about, and I can run a human design chart. But we all come into this world with different designs, different personalities and that type of thing. And we're kind of born with that. It's not the nature nurture. This is the nature. Like we're born with these specific things and behaviors that are part of our personality. And so it's really good to understand, like my husband is very different than I am. And once I learned the human design, I understood, wow, that's why he is that way. It's not to be annoying.
Right.
This is just who he is, right? And you learn to take in the strengths of what people have and to understand where are the challenges and then figure out what your boundaries are. I talk about that in the village. There might be some boundaries that you need to put in place just so that everybody can kind of breathe and not be at each other's throats all the time.
Yeah.
So C stands for claiming your future. And this is what I learned living with a 96-year-old and a newborn baby and a toddler who grew into a toddler is we have most of us have some ancestral wounding or generational things that may have happened. So in my mom's case, she had an abandonment within her since she was a little. And then I had a brother who died before I was born. So she was a grieving mom that never goes away. And so all of those things were things to work with healing. But the beauty of our multi-generational home is my son and his wife had a baby. And little Grace came into our life. And she really is full of grace. And she would go into my mom's mother-in-law's suite and just spend time with her. When she could crawl, she'd crawl in there. And then, more recently, they'd walk and they'd chatter and they'd sit across the dinner table. We always had a family dinner. We do every night. And so this little girl would sit across from my 96-year-old mother, and they had like this language that none of us could quite understand, but they connected. And my mom started to find healing and joy at 96. It took her that long to get to that point, but she found joy. And my mom, who struggled with hearing that she was loved, it was hard for her. And that's part of the generation too. To feel that unconditional love from a child. And my mom would grin. She'd show all of her teeth. She never did that her whole life. But with this little child, she found the healing and the deep healing, which I am just so grateful for because she found it in this life. And what a gift she gave my granddaughter of just that energy of just loving unconditionally also as a great grandmother. So I go through some exercises of taking a look at what kind of might be going on in your family. Abandonment was like when I went through and did my work, it was like, wow, this goes all the way back for generations, even my mother's previous generations. So how do we do some healing? So I talk about how do we use, I call them the universal human, what do I say, laws, universal laws of humanity or nature, or whatever. And so it's forgiveness. And how do we forgive, which isn't easy all the time, but I have some different prayers and tools, and not necessarily in a specific spiritual manner, but ways that we can do forgiveness. Also, how do we use kindness to help forward that? And what really is this unconditional love? And how do we really unconditionally love? We talk about that a lot, but it's that forgiveness is really important to be able to love people just because they're human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very synchronous. Is that the right word? Synchronous? There was a lot of synchronicity. There we go. I was talking with a girlfriend of mine that I had grown up with since I was little, and she had called and said, I need you to look at this prayer that I've been saying. And now I hope I pronounced this correct. The Ho'oponopono, how do you say that?
Ho'oponopono,
Oh,
the
yeah.
Hawaiian, the Hawaiian
Yes.
Ho'oponopono.
Yes. Okay. And it's that I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And I had just had that conversation with her. And then I had opened up your book and I had read your book and I had read all about that. And so I took a picture of it and I sent it to her and I said, what are the odds of the timing of this? Right.
Yep, the universe moves in
I know.
very
Yes.
interesting ways. That's
Yes,
awesome.
it was so beautiful. And on your point about forgiving, you talk about how forgiving is for the giving, not for the taking. And I
Yes.
think a lot of times we forget that I'm going to forgive because then I will feel better and I can move on, rather than we're giving that gift, right?
Yes, yes, it's for giving,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it isn't easy. I talk about some of the things that were, happened in our family and things, and it's interesting. I was talking to a client the other day, and he's like, "I really have to work on this forgiveness. I really have to work on this forgiveness." And I said, what I found is when I stopped worrying about having to forgive, I stopped worrying about it because other things came into my life that I had to focus on. All of a sudden, that stuff that I felt I needed to forgive went away. It just disappeared. So when we move towards the things that are out of the heart, and we are living in that space that we are for giving to other people, all of a sudden the angst, the worries, the traumas, all of that kind of stuff kind of just slides away,
Yeah.
and then it's gone.
looking at when you had mentioned those generational things that people are dealing with, I see that quite a bit. I see it in my own life with my grandma came to live with us when I was younger and had that same component of multi-generational living and her traumas that she went through as a young child, losing a father at a very young age. But also I see it in caregiver groups where those wounds that we're dealing with not only as a child but as our parents, and it's also affecting that caregiving dynamic. So
Yes,
being able to look at that, and we'll get into that a little bit too in the future, but how important it is to really take that into consideration when we are in relationship with people.
absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much healing. But that's the beauty, I think, of this
Mm-hmm.
whole multi-generational and being a caregiver is we can take the action. We can choose. We can
Mm-hmm.
choose to create a better life. And I talk about, there's a lot to do with epigenetics, and Bruce Lipton is very renowned with that. But epigenetics is about how we can actually change the way our DNA reacts by our thoughts and through all of the things that we go through. So the emotions that we're surrounded with, the emotions that when we're pregnant, and what's going on in our environment, we can affect in a negative way if we have those traumas and dramas going on in our life. But the beautiful thing is we can actually counteract that. And when we bring in positive emotions and we bring in an intentionality to heal, because it's a choice. It really is a choice. Now, there's times I felt like I was a victim, but it really was my choice to say, am I going to move forward with this? And my mom and I had a tenuous relationship. I was the only daughter. I was the youngest. I wasn't exactly what she might think I should be or marry into, what I should marry into, or have a job like maybe that I should have. That she just didn't have an understanding because we were very different generations. And we were two women that had similar strong personality styles. So we would clash. But she also was my best friend. And so when I started going back to really healing that part of the relationship, and especially as she got towards the end, where I'd say over the last couple of years where I could spend the time, sometimes she would really get on my nerves, and she would not be always nice, because, and now when I look back at it, it's like, oh, she must have been in a lot of pain. It must have been really tough for her. But I started going into her room when I could sense that she was having a not so great time. And I would go back to, I'm working with an elderly patient, an elderly resident. I love working with the elderly. And so I kind of took away the mom figure
Mm-hmm.
and put it in this just a beautiful, lovely old soul. And I just need to take care of her with that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I took away the relationship piece of it, I was able to care for her so gently and not let the emotions override it when she was cranky.
Yeah.
And I don't blame her for being cranky. She
Right.
had a lot of things going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good perspective.
And the last part of the balance, just to get to that E, is entering into a life of purpose. And it kind of has that forgiving thing too. We give. But what I have found is this is why we're here on this earth, is we are here to support one another. We're here to share our gifts with one another. And when we start serving others, we really walk life with a servant's heart, whether it's in our own home with our children, our parents, our grandchildren, or if it's going out into our jobs and serving, the people that we serve wherever we're at with that, in our communities. Once we step into that life of purpose, that really is like exciting and thrilling for us. It makes us feel good. And we figure out what our life, we can step into that. And so all that stress of living in a multi-generational family, that's why I say you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have both, and you can have this crazy, chaotic, stress-filled life at times, but you can also have where you are stepping into what you love to do. And that really is living our life of purpose.
And it's so important to get to that place, because then when you are stepping into that, you feel more whole. And then in turn, you're able to, like you said, you can't give a cup without a gallon for yourself. And once you come into that place, we're able to give those cups.
Absolutely. And then we just keep refilling.
Yeah.
We keep refilling our own, because if we deplete ourselves, it's like that, when you go on an airline and they put on your own oxygen mask first, because you're not going to do any good if you're depleted.
Right.
You're not going to be able to serve your elderly parent, your children, your grandchildren, or your neighbors. I believe that all of us are meant to be living lives filled with joy and energy. We have our challenges in life, but ultimately we're here that we're supposed to be having fun, have joy, and serve others, but do it with a joy in our heart and enjoy what's going on in life.
Right. I agree.
Versus it being a drudgery all the time.
Yes, completely. And we need that encouragement sometimes from people that, okay, let's do this. Let's live that joy-filled life. So happy that you can, help people along that journey. It's so important.
Well, that's what fills my cup. I have to tell you, Nicole, that when I do Zoom calls, of course, because we're in this life now. But I can see the change on people's faces week after week, as they start taking action, and they're like stepping into the stuff that they love to do, and that speaks to their heart. And I can just see it. I said, I always wish I had like time-lapse camera where I could show what people started and then where they changed dramatically, even over just like 8 times, visits with me. It's amazing.
That's
and
amazing.
That's what fills my gallon, is to see people stepping into the lives they love, and taking care of their families and healing all that stuff, because I'm very passionate about the babies of our world and the babies to come in our world and the generations that are coming in the future, that we need to heal. We all need to take that responsibility today in our seat, so that we can heal and make this life so much better, and take away all that kind of heavy baggage, so our kids don't have that.
Right.
And our grandchildren don't have that. It will make this world a much more happier, beautiful place.
Yeah, it really will. You had some early challenges with your mom that you talk about when she came to live with you. How did you move through those and go from a place of feeling less sandwiched, I guess we could say, to having that deep gratitude?
The one thing that, for anybody who's listening, creating a deep change, especially with elderly, is understanding that any kind of change is really 10 times, 100 times worse than it would be for us, because they have, they're looking for consistency. They're not sure. They may have a little dementia, all of that. And then their independence feels like it's just ripped out from them when they know that they can't take care of themselves. My mom made the decision to move in. We invited her, but she wasn't able to keep up with her apartment. She got very angry with me. We had words, and it would get very, a lot tension filled. And I just really had to keep going back to that place of, she's an elderly woman. This change is very dramatic. So I think realizing how deep this changes, and do them slowly, really helping your elderly parent or loved one, well, actually anybody in your family, have an input, give them choices, so that they just don't feel like everything, and go slow. Don't try to rush through things if there's any way, and have familiarity. I made sure that when mom moved in, that she could choose what she wanted from her apartment and just bring them in and have that piece of it. And how did I get to that gratitude? It was a process. I used the tools that I talk about in the book. I used the Ho'oponopono. That was a very poignant time when I took my mom to a cemetery where her parents and my dad and my brother and all these people were buried. And I did this prayer Ho'oponopono, and it was amazing how um, fast that shifted just for my mom to know that I do love her, and I was going to take responsibility just as a human being to ask for forgiveness on behalf of all these people that couldn't ask now because they were gone. And that meant so much to her. And I don't know, my granddaughter was a huge help, to just bring in seeing the life through others' eyes, and I just want to share this is the first podcast I've done since my mom died. After she died, I sat in her mother-in-law's suite. I had a little procedure done, and so I was recuperating, and I thought, I'm going to sit up there. And I sat in her chair, and across from me was this beautiful portrait I had done of my brother who had died. And I just sat at the chair, and for a long time, I always felt guilty and bad that I wasn't as communicative with my mom, because she started not having a lot to talk about. She didn't go anywhere. I didn't have a lot to talk about because she didn't have a lot to talk about. So, and she was quiet a lot. And I'd always like, Mom, is there anything I can do for you? Is there anywhere you want to go? Anything like that? And she'd be like, no. What are you thinking about, Mom? I'd put thoughts into her head thinking what she's thinking. And she'd say, I have no thoughts. And I sat in that chair after she had died and spent 2 or 3 days, and I was able to put myself in her seat. And it was so beautifully comforting and quiet and relaxing. And I thought, oh, that's really what she was feeling in those final months, is just kind of a quiet, relaxed, beautiful energy. And she could just sit. And so that kind of changed things for me, and will change it going forward. So that's one thing that I would tell people who are listening is we a lot of times will put the words into other people's mouths, so to speak, and think that we know what they're thinking, and we don't. So if we can just step into their seat, into their shoes, and see life from their perspective, that's where you can bring that harmony. That's where you can bring that beauty. And as I said, watching my mom find healing is the greatest gift I could ever have in the world. Watching her smile, this big, broad smile, and knowing that I know she was so grateful that she was being cared for, even though she might not have been able to. She was a stoic German Luxembourger, she might not have been able to say it, but I know that she absolutely appreciated that she got to spend almost 8 years with us and in a home surrounded, and to be able to die at home surrounded by the people that love her.
Yeah.
And that's the gift that we end up taking. So for all the caregivers out there, I know it's stressful. I know that there's times you just want to like run. And I said this to my husband, I just want to quit everything and run away.
Yeah.
No one can find me.
Yes.
But the reality is I'm so grateful that I was able to share my life and heal all those things that, are not big deals in the scheme of things.
It's a beautiful story that you shared about sitting in your mom's chair and witnessing what she witnessed those last, few months, because a lot of times I think we, like you said, want to put what our thoughts are on someone and what they must be thinking or what we think that they should talk about. But knowing that she had such a peaceful, calm time and existence, and felt so much love that she probably just could sit in that quiet, and it's uncomfortable to be quiet for a lot of people. We want to fill it with space and noise, and that's, where we go. But that she could just embrace it is really, really amazing.
Yeah. And she and I would have some really good conversations. I am a grief coach. I specialize in grieving. And this has gone on for a few years, that because her health would wax and wane. And sometimes there were twice I had her on hospice and she graduated from it. But I would have those conversations about death and dying because there was a fear for a long time, like, And I would say like maybe a month before she died, and she wasn't doing really great. And I remember sitting at her feet and I said, "Are you ready, Mom? It just feels like you're kind of like getting into that space where you're getting ready." And she said, "I'm ready. But there's, even though you're ready, there's still some fear." And I said, "So where's the fear? Is it the fear in what happens after you die, or is it the fear in the process of dying?" And she looked me straight in the eye and she said, "The process of." And so I was able to assure her that I was going to make sure in any way I could to make it peaceful and comfortable and loving for her. And I think we don't have those conversations, and it's so important. And my mom didn't necessarily like to, there are times I tried to have those conversations and I would get shut down. So I had to have the grace to say, okay, it's not time.
Yeah.
But when there was the timing and opening it up to have those conversations with your loved ones, because you'll have a much greater sense after they transition of the peace and the comfort that you were able to provide and not have regrets.
It's scary to talk about our fears, and death for people is a big one, especially right as we get older in our life, and being able to feel safe enough to voice that and ask the question of our loved ones and just say, we are here for you and we'll make it as calm and as safe and as loving as we possibly can. Just that reassurance.
Yeah.
There are so many rich blessings from living in a multi-generational home. Your book talks about many of those. If someone is thinking of possibly contemplating something like this, where would you tell them to start? And what are some of those blessings? If you could highlight, like your top 3 blessings.
Okay. Well, first, I mean, if you're contemplating it, get a free book from me. And this actually can help you kind of think through some of those things. And it's, there's a lot of different things to think about as far as the financial, who's going to take care of who, where's your extended family, and siblings come into play, and how do you create, so that they can still have access to your elderly loved ones, that type of thing. So that you make sure that you have all of those kind of clear and take from some of the things that I kind of stumbled on and that I learned from. So, but definitely the book is for free, so you can certainly get that. If anybody's like, wow, I just really would like to have someone to talk to, I do free calls with people so that we can sit down and kind of see what the situation is, because I do coach people into this program to help them to go from point A to wherever they want it to end up to be. The top blessings. Oh, wow. Family. I have this thing. It's a little thing. It says the most important work you will ever do will be within the walls of your home. And the blessing that I see is being sandwiched in the middle, being the daughter. I was able to heal my relationship with my mom and help her to find healing and grace in her last years on this earth. So that was beautiful. The wisdom that she brought and that she shared. My mom was 96 and she could sit across the table at dinner and talk about investments and politics and things like that, and they've lived a life that we maybe haven't experienced certain things. So during the pandemic, she's like, it'll all be fine. When financial things arise, we've been through it all, the politics. She's like, I've seen it all. So it'll all play out. It'll all be. So they bring a calmness to the rest of the family. My siblings and I got closer, even though they weren't living with us. We really have a deeper understanding. And for the children, our children are our teachers. And so living in a multi-generational home and taking the wisdom from those that are younger than us, we may be the elders, but our children and our children's children may be our teachers. And so taking that in. So that's the blessing, is we're always learning. And we have the ability, the biggest blessing, I think, is that we have the ability to recorrect. We can correct things that may not have been perfect in the past and and find this healing and joy, this amazing relationship within our family, that a lot of people we lose over time and we can gain it back.
This was so wonderful. Thank you so much. We could talk for hours,
Yeah.
I'm sure, and hear all about everything. But the beauty is that people can find you and connect with you, whether it's through your coaching or your book. Where can we direct people to find out more about you?
Okay, my website is healingfamilygrief.com. And all you have to do, if you want this book, I have another book that actually shows up on there, which is about child loss. But if you want this particular book and you want me to email it, just put in a message at healingfamilygrief.com and I will send you a free ebook. And and hope that it helps lots of people, and people can connect with me there too if they want to get on the phone and have a chat with me. I'm available for that too.
Sounds good. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you so much.
So I have to tell you about Jimmy Zolo and his new company, Joe and Bella. Our paths had crossed, and I'm so glad they did. It was such a pleasure to meet Jimmy. He is passionate about older adults. He told me that after both of his grandparents moved into a care community, his family's world was turned upside down, and they really became caregivers overnight. As you know, being a caregiver to someone close to you is often overwhelming. There's so much for you to manage, even with the support of a care community, like making sure your loved one has all of the products that they need and keeping them stocked when things run out, keeping inventory on what you have and what you don't. Jimmy also had that problem, and he was scrolling through all of these product reviews across the internet, and like most of us in the sandwich generation, we don't have enough hours in the day. It can feel really overwhelming and time-consuming and frustrating. We don't know what we're always looking for. And he wished there was a way to shop for his grandparents. Then the pandemic hit, preventing visitation to care communities, making this process even more difficult. So Jimmy decided to launch his own business to solve this problem. He founded Joe and Bella to make shopping for older adults simple. They carry everything from comfy clothes to creative gifts. They even have toiletries that can be automatically reordered and tech that makes caregiving easier. Everything all in one location. What I love, and I know you guys will love too, is that each and every product on Joe and Bella has been carefully selected by caregiving experts. Jimmy is so generous. He is giving an exclusive offer to our listeners of our podcast. You can use the promo code GATHER to receive 10% off your first purchase at joeandbella.com. That code is GATHER, GATHER, for 10% off at joeandbella.com. You don't want to miss this offer. Head to their website and check it out. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.